A druid lich symbiotic with an ooze, or a frog-like vampire that suck blood through their suction cups on their fingers. A player who is half will-o-wisp, or a ghost possession that turns herbivores into carnivores. The undead is both an overdone and largely unexplored avenue of fantasy. Ghosts, vampires, and zombies are most likely a familiar expectation for your players. Ghosts possess, vampires bite, zombies shamble, so if you're going to implement them into your campaign, you're going to want to make them more interesting and extraordinary. So let's ask, how will the dead raise in your campaign? Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. With the spooky month of October and Halloween on the horizon, we look forward to a whole month of goth horror and undead, gaining alternate inspiration for your death-themed subclasses and what kind of character to bring to your Ravenloft campaigns. So make sure that you subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss anything. So let's start out on how to make your undead more interesting, even subverting some overdone tropes to bring them to the next level. A big point of fact with the undead is that they were something before they became undead. So most relevant example is a Lich, where in most cases they were a wizard who wanted to continue their study forever, as if college wasn't enough for anyone. But what about a zombie, a ghost, a vampire? What if they were more than just a commoner before they were afflicted? In the example of a Lich, why not implement in your campaign one that wasn't a wizard, but a druid? What would be a druid's motivation to live forever? Would they transform into the skeletons or zombified versions of their wild-shaped animals? Instead of tattered robes and a book, you would have tree roots and swamp flowers intertwined with their bones, even a tree growing out of their back. But then what about a Lich bard? One that has strung their ribs with strings of a harp, or their own bones have holes like a flute? What would a bard want to achieve in undeath? But what about a paladin death knight Lich? A zealot barbarian that raged themselves into immortality, an artificer that lives on through a magical aid of undead life support, or a monk who accessed the dark side of their key and their enlightenment came with a price. Or even subclasses like a fathomless warlock Lich, or a Psy-Knife rogue Lich. How did that happen? A Lich doesn't have to be a wizard spellcaster every time, so in the same vein, how different would your zombie be if they had class-like abilities as well? A zombie sorcerer or cleric that still has retained their abilities from when they were living, because if a player wanted to play an undead, they would level up in the class themselves. Your vampire druid would turn into a vampire versions of any animal instead of just bats. A vampire monk, barbarian, artificer, or even a cleric, and for some reason this one, isn't vulnerable to radiant damage like other undead counterparts are. Ghost druid still turning into ghosts of animals, a ghost abjurer that casts shield magic, or an artificer ghost that uses a magical item as a vessel. Think about who they might have been in the past life, and how they may still manifest beyond death. Now let's move on to something also very common amongst the undead, phylacteries. Again, most commonly known for the Horcrux Liches to basically have a respawn point, but this is also your resting places for your vampires, or haunted objects keeping ghosts anchored into the material world. Normally a jar or a crystal, but let's explore some other respawn points your undead can have. Instead of objects, why not creatures? A giant, a dragon, a fey creature, etc. What if any of these undead is using this living thing as a safeguard for their life? They might be protecting an item because of a deal that they struck with the Lich or vampire, or just like Harry Potter, they themselves are the Horcrux or Phylactery. The players are met with this dilemma of having to kill this creature, either hostile or peaceful, in order to weaken the undead threat. The moral quandary is increased if the person that is this vessel is someone that they know, maybe even a descendant of the undead creature or a player themselves. They might not know this fact or have been hiding it from the other players until now. If they are possessed by a ghost, they don't have to know that they are possessed. Ghosts don't have to be hostile in possession, but could be biding their time, randomly influencing the character in their roles over time, remaining inconspicuous until they are discovered. On the other hand, what if the phylactery was something huge, somehow being tied to a whole town or castle, a forest or coral reef? Do the players need to set a forest on fire or destroy an entire town to remove the option of respawn for the enemy? Or what if the phylactery is just a recycled genie bottle? Which brings us to the next point of inspiration, making other monsters undead. We have a stat block for a ghost dragon and an undead beholder, death tyrant, but what about others? What would a lich, ghost, zombie, or vampire genie look like? Especially if vampirism and zombification is a transmittable disease, what would it look like if a ooze contracted it, or a fiend, or a fae? Strahd would be an entirely different character if they were originally an angel of the upper planes before they contracted the curse. Or in the Lich's case, it could have been the process used in achieving undeath, relating to some of these creatures. In my home campaign, for example, oozes are a primordial ooze used in the magic surrounding life and by association, necromancy. Perhaps the missing limbs or organs of the lich or zombie are replaced with clear pockets of ooze, or their skin smoldering with the coals of hell with the aid of a devil contract. Or their undeath was achieved through giant runes from a storm giant that's a lich themselves. Think about how the undead has interacted with different creatures and monsters around your world and what kind of havoc that they may cause. Maybe the combination was either an accident or very purposeful. If you're looking for a physical source of creative inspiration for your undeads, check out my magazine this month, Blood and Brains, exploring the characters' influence with eldritch vampires, will-o-wisps, and more, and providing more inspiration to tie them all into your world building. Check them out on my website or get both this issue and last month's Adventures in Space issue through my Patreon, all linked below. Hope you can dig up some good ideas. Now let's look at the different creatures themselves and how they can be different across your campaigns and settings. Starting with the zombie, there are many iterations across mythology and media, including skeletons, mummies, thralls, revenants, ghouls, and similar creatures. You can look into the myths of other countries for inspiration. It could be the Draugr, a zombie with superhuman strength from Scandinavia, the Bake Kujira, or skeleton whale from Japan, or the Nexurur, which I'm really hoping I'm pronouncing all of these correctly, a zombie that prefers feasting on life force instead of brains from Germany. In modern media, there are countless iterations of the zombie, including Minecraft, Plants vs. Zombies, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Elden Ring, The Last of Us, and the list goes on and on. Take inspiration from your favorite movies, books, and video games to bring something unique to the table, but also think about how your zombies would fit in different parts of your world. A husk from the desert, a frozen corpse from Antarctica, a barnacle-crusted face of a drowned. You can also look at some zombies from D&D in editions past. The Juju zombie, one that was both created by and resistant to magics. The Tyrant Fog zombie, an undead cult priest with fog coming out of their nostrils. The Bone Bats, which are self-explanatory, and the Dread, which are literally just a pair of arms and a sword. And remember that zombies also don't have to be the unintelligent shamblers that we have grown accustomed to see. Perhaps they are as intelligent as their creators themselves. Ghosts now are equally diverse. You have banshees, poltergeist, shadows, wights, will-o-wisps, aleps, characters like the Headless Horseman, etc. But you also can take inspiration from Onryo, a spirit created from a single intense emotion from Japan, the drowned ghost of La Llorona from Latin America, or Bloody Mary, where you can summon her if you say her name and spin around 3 times in a mirror. In media, you have things like The Christmas Carol, Ghostbusters, The Ring, Mario, or even Pokemon. A vast difference between ghosts. You can have the scary possession kind or the helpful omen kind. In previous editions of D&D, you can find the Doomsphere, a beholder ghost, something called the Watch Ghost, which because of their nature can't be turned by clerics, or a Drelb, which were able to learn psionic magic. As an added note, ghosts don't need to be incorporeal or ethereal either. They could look identical to a normal living, breathing person, but stand with a blank stare or suddenly disappear when you blink. Next, we look at vampires. Very famous ones, where they are a lot more niche, but in this category, we also have the Nosferatu, Dhampir, and Vampiric Mist. There are, however, many different iterations of these bloodsuckers throughout different cultures. The Sequoiant from the Caribbean is an old woman that sheds her skin and travels as a ball of flame at night. The Menenengal from the Philippines as a woman that feasts on toddlers and mutates their face while flying on bat wings and able to separate their torso from their legs. Crazy. The Vauban Sith is a fairy vampire from Scotland that drinks through its claws and can turn into a wolf. Or one of my personal favorite, the Yaramayahu, an Australian frog-like creature that drinks through suckers in their fingers. Though not every vampire are bloodsuckers. Many vampiric creatures feed off of energy, ki, life force, or the soul, memories, or even pain, kind of like Dementors from Harry Potter. I would say have fun and make a vampire that could also feed off of the magic of others or their psionic energy. You may also find inspiration in media like Buffy, the Twilight series, Blade, I Am Legend, or heck, What We Do in the Shadows. And in previous editions of D&D, you could look at the Goki, reincarnations of wicked people that played on a Baiwa to stun their enemies. But talking about undead bards, or the vampiric muse, a fey vampire that coupled their vampiric charm with their fey charm. Also pretty niche are liches, but also include things like alhoons, demi-liches, a draconic shard, draco liches, and death knights. There isn't a lot of variety across different cultures as it's more of a modern concept, but one of the first to explore a phylactery was Koshai the Deathless, a Russian wizard whose soul was in a needle, which was in an egg, which was in a duck, which was in a hare, which was in an iron-bound chest, which was buried under an oak tree on the island of Bienne. Just try to have your players find that one. But inspiration for your liches from media could include The Mummy, The Black Cauldron, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, Sauron from The Lord of the Rings, Voldemort in Harry Potter, and many characters in Elder Scrolls or World of Warcraft. Again, I would say go crazy with your Lich origins and unique abilities. The Eldritch Lich in a recent Spelljammer compendium is a perfect example of a Lich that looked to more of an aberrant source of magic. With all of these different types of monsters though, the key to horror and fear is the unknown. And the key is to cultivate that unknown to create suspense. So another tip to have your undead be formidable and terrifying is giving them more regional effects. Whether it be a single lich or vampire or a vast horde of zombies or ghosts in an area, the necrotic energy of death should be seen throughout the landscape and affect the players within it. I mean, dragons have enough magic within them to change the region around them. Why not powerful undead magic? I think it's silly that Vecna, probably the most famous lich, has no regional effects at all. No swirling shadow above the castle or withering trees for miles around. I say make it fun and foreshadow the danger to come. There can be dense vampiric fog, blood that falls like rain, bats and rats that swarm to the area, or palpable paranoia that overcomes the players, or biblical possession of farm animals either eating each other or drowning themselves in the river. Bright light turns to dim light, or ethereal pockets that push you and your party into the ethereal plane. You can even use rules for the Shadowfell in the Dungeon Master's Guide for inspiration. Always be thinking of how you can push the envelope with the undead to surprise your players and keep them guessing, and by association, fearing. How would you bring the dead to life in your campaign? Tell me about your undead players and creatures in the comments below. I'll be putting my other spooky videos up here once they're up, so go and check them out for more inspiration. But in the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D and make the world a better place, both on and off the table. See you in the next one.